Welcome. Thanks so much for joining my session at EDUtech 2021. In this session, I'd like to explore the concept of live online cultures, how we can create transformational virtual engagement in the live online environment. And I look forward to answering all of your questions at the end of this presentation. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which I am hosting this session, the people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and their emerging leaders. I'm Cheryle Walker. I work almost exclusively in a webcam square, helping organisations and individuals find their authentic self, their brand, and their rhythm for working and learning in the live online environment. I've been doing this for just on 20 years, and so I was match fit when we hit the lockdowns last year due to the pandemic. What I'm really interested in is how we take what we've learned rapidly in the last 18 months and make this live online environment as humanistic and real as we can. So, the world is in a unique position right now, no doubt. That quote from Lisa Messenger. In 2020, as you know, countries went into various versions of lockdown, and organisations, individuals, managers, entrepreneurs, we all quickly hopped online to manage, deliver, and facilitate virtually what we needed to get done. We found new ways to work, collaborate, learn, consult, and even sell from a webcam. Many of those online interactions went well, and many others were awkward or confusing or overwhelmingly fatiguing. But everyone coped as best they could. So, technology barriers and difficulties were overcome along the way. Personal spaces, home environments became working spaces, and to social distance meant that many face to face or in real life events immediately became virtual. And I think that's an unfortunate choice of word. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So, as we grow and emerge from 2020, where there are all sorts of new normal to be redefined and navigated, and so leveraging this shift to virtual is now a compelling focus. How to really engage with flair, interact meaningfully, maintain attention, and raise commitment in the virtual live online environment. I'd like to check in with everybody as to how they're feeling at this point in time, particularly with a lot of us working and learning remotely. I find a range of responses and feelings, some quite optimistic and positive, and others expressing understandable challenges. In the live sense, I run this as a Mentimeter poll, and it's interesting to feel the pulse of the participants I have live online with me. I encourage you to show empathy to your live online participants by checking in on how they're feeling before you commence any session. This is one of the most powerful empathy objects in the live online environment. I'll introduce you to empathy objects a little bit later. We're all starting to talk about and explore hybrid working and learning environments for the longer term. And so George Penn from Gartner recently said that we need to stop seeing things as they are now, as short term or temporary. We need to embrace the opportunities in front of us. In a moment, I'd like to introduce you to a framework by which we can measure a live online culture, a human system where we construct our live online experiences purposefully and aim to achieve the highest possible, even transformational outcomes. So, this is how we can measure and build a live online culture from disconnected to transformational. The first level here is disconnected. This is where the focus is to just manage. We've got incomplete tools and we're not quite understanding how to work remotely, but at least we're giving it a go. At this level, the very lowest level, we're probably down on our productivity by around 25%, as distinct from if we were working in our normal, the way we used to do things. If we rise up the ladder a little, this next level up is called remote. And so remote working and delivery experiences, but are still held back by a limiting mindset. So we're still perhaps not enjoying the experience. We're limited in our use of the tools. We're expecting this to be temporary. We're calling it remote. We're not enjoying it at all. And at this level, we hope that we've got no impact to our productivity. We're kind of around about that zero impact to what we're doing. Next level up, I call communicative. So this is where presentations and communications are delivered with a foundational skill set in the tools and technologies. And I think a lot of us rapidly got to this level last year. At this level, we're 25% productive of where we can be. We're communicating well. We've got good tools. And we're getting used to presenting and being natural in a webcam, perhaps for some of us. Next level up the ladder again, then, is what I call collaborative. And so this is an environment where participants interact effectively to maintain the team and keep producing the work. So I think a lot of us got to this position as well, where we started to form a rhythm. Maybe we had daily catch-ups, weekly catch-ups. We might have had some fun things in there, some quarantinis and some drinks at the end of the day, some trivia nights, things like that. So we're about 50% of where we used to be when we were face to face or in real life only. And that's what I call a collaborative level. Okay, if we keep going up those ladders, we come up to inspirational. This is where high engagement and effectiveness with a high level of confidence and innovation in the technologies exist. Organisations that get up to this innovational level or inspirational level enjoy about 75% of their previous level of productivity. So this is where people might be much more enjoying the experience and being quite productive. We're seeing some innovative things occur, a little bit of wow, maybe. And then the final top pillar of these levels is the transformational level. And this is where fully immersive online interactions occur with high trust and high commitment and with a significant impact to the work that needs to be done at 100% of our productive level. So I can measure these levels within an organisation. We can measure it within a program. It's really interesting for you perhaps to think about in the work that you do or the programs that you run, where might you place yourself on this scale in terms of the productivity and the feel of the events that you run, the live online events? Interesting to think about that. And interesting to work towards up the ladder, climbing those little ladders in between, getting up to perhaps inspirational and indeed transformational levels. It's definitely possible. Okay. So, if we're going to get to that transformational level of live online culture, we must know the levers we have to shift. The levers that will shift people's perceptions, allow people to engage fully, and drive positive and purposeful outcomes. So, there's three levers I have researched and I write about in my book. The first one is language. The language we use, how we refer to these interactions, whether we call them remote, whether we call them virtual. And then the second step is empathy, or the second lever, pardon me, is empathy. So the way that we express empathy and develop empathy amongst participants when we're in a live online environment. We're not physically together, remember. So empathy is one that we really need to focus on bringing into this environment. And the third lever then is inclusivity. And inclusivity is the most powerful lever that we have to use. So these are the three levers that we can focus on if we're going to move up those levels of live online culture, up to the inspirational and transformational levels. So let's have a look at this first lever, language. The reason language is so important to promoting live, intimate, powerful, transformative conversations is that we need to be real. We need to acknowledge that this is our current reality and that we're not pretending or waiting until we can be in the same physical room again. How many times have you heard that over the last 18 months? When we can get back together again, then we'll talk about or plan or do this. We need to get on and reframe what is our real life, not our temporary one. So there's much more to language than words. You'll need to consider things like music, visual languages, and every possible translation of communications if your live online interactions are to be transformational. So there's a number of things there that we can work on. Pre and post communications about your live online events, how you warm up the session, how you introduce the purpose of the session, who you invite. When we're in the session, then music, using music as a language. looking at how well we use visual communication in sessions, and being able to change your view using the technology to create an experience and multiple viewpoints for your participants, not looking at the same screen all of the time. So the one I'm going to dive into just in this brief session is that first one there, words. Words matter. Robin Sharma said, words can inspire and words can destroy. Choose yours well. So, a lot of what's been said about virtual or remote working and learning has been framed by the challenges, not the opportunities. These words, virtual and remote, focus on what is missing, what has been lost, not on what has been gained. And yet, there's been much gained in our shift to working from home and working from anywhere. So, for example, the word virtual, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, means created by computer technology and appearing to exist but not existing in the physical world. Not a very inspiring idea, is it, if we think about that particular definition of virtual? And perhaps our more vernacular definition these days has centered around lockdowns, not being able to be together and being frustrated and fatigued by the software. So, virtual perhaps hasn't got a good connotation for us as a word. If we look at the word remote, this means far away in distance or time or separated from a distance. Once again, not a very inspiring word. If we think about it really, we're all connected more than ever, even globally, by the brilliance of technologies. And so connection is the positive outcome from making use of virtual environments and remembering to include our remote colleagues. Connection is our liberation and it's also our opportunity. So I'd like to suggest, as Sharma said, that we choose our words carefully. We would be better to frame things in a much more positive way if we use words like live, online, and connected. And in the word balloon on the screen, I've included a whole range of words that could be used to label the live, online, connected events that we host and participate in. Let's try some of these out. So we're going to have a connected roundtable, a live online summit, a live connected muster, a hearing, a workshop, a focus group, a gathering, a chinwag, a salon, a council, a round robin, a mingle, a wrap, a swarm, a reception, a community, a gathering, a practicum, a clinic, a buzz, a study, a powwow. I'm reading so many off there. Uh, think about how that can create an anticipation and expectation of your next live online event rather than simply saying we're going to go virtual, we're going to do this virtually, or this will be a remote one or a remote session. I think we're a little bit fatigued of that. So I'd like to inspire you to think about using deliberate words, choosing your words carefully, because words matter when it creates those expectations, inspirations for your people coming along. So let's have a look now at the second lever, empathy. Theodore Roosevelt said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So empathy is the juice that will grow and sustain our collaborative energies. When we gather, we rapidly seek something in common or something supportive of our own intentions, and we're curious for just a few moments. So if we were here in the convention hall at EDUtech 2021 in Melbourne, we would be gathering, we would be curious, we would be feeling the collaborative energies around with people. We need to create that in our online environments. So, why are others in the same space as ourselves in this particular point in time is a really good question, even if that is in the live, online, connected space. This is where our opportunity must be seized to commence the construction of a shared knowingness and a collective adventure in this environment. So there's many humanistic techniques that we can use and ways of engaging with our participants that will invoke the empathy level. I'll talk about just the first one in a moment. Let's have a look at what some of these other empathy teeth are on the lever, the second lever. So empathy objects is the first one. Arrival and departure experiences. Think about how your audience, your participants will experience arriving to the live online connected session and how you will send them off with a buzz. There's a rhythm that we create in the session if we think carefully and purposely about designing that rhythm. The feel, think, do rhythm, I tend to call it. What do we want them to feel? How do we want them to think? And then what are we going to ask them to do, or what do we expect them to do? And then, of course, then we can get quite snazzy with some shock, awe, and surprise in sessions as well. Okay, I'm going to talk about this first one, empathy objects. So, empathy objects in the live online environment are those mechanisms, routines, and experiences that amplify our shared values and promote the shared pursuits and bond us together, those of us who are participating or live online and connected together. These are the most powerful empathy objects that we can employ in our live online connected sessions. You'll see some of those in there. The first one I want to highlight for you is having webcams on. I'm sure you've all experienced the tedium and the disconnection you feel when we have no webcams on. We can hear people or maybe not hear many voices. It's very difficult to facilitate as a leader or as a host. It's very difficult to facilitate a session where you can't see, can't look into the eyes of the people, you can't see the people out there. So webcams on is really important. Eye contact is really important, and we do that by addressing the camera, addressing the webcam, but also looking into the eyes of our participants when necessary on the screen to pick up a whole range of things that we do with our mirror neurons in our brain. Um, Being very deliberate about introductions. How are you going to get people to introduce themselves or introduce themselves to each other? Acknowledgements follows closely or just prior to that. So at the beginning of this session, I conducted one acknowledgement to our country. There are other acknowledgements that you can build in depending on the culture that you're fitting with in your live online sessions, the culture of your audience. Uh, Constructing an inclusive agenda. So, thinking about who actually has a say in what's on the agenda and who has a part to play in the agenda. Getting some cooperative group work going. We know we can make good use of breakout rooms. Getting some peer feedback sessions going. There's a number of ways we can do that. Running a conversational style or thread throughout your session rather than a lecture or a presentation style can be really helpful. And then thinking about those connections out of the session. What role do you play as a facilitator or a host to seed those connections that you want to continue participants to have outside of the live online session? You know, how far can you stretch your digital footprints once you've completed your live online session or a series of? So there's some of the empathy objects that we can unpack and explore and use to our advantage if we think about that second lever of empathy in live online environments. And let's now have a quick look at the third lever, which is inclusivity. The first rule of using the inclusivity lever in live online interactions is to utterly reject a deficit mindset. A deficit mindset is the suggestion that it's never going to be as good as being together in person. And I've experienced leaders who have opened up live online forums, focus groups, town halls, leadership programs by firstly apologising for the fact that we can't be together. And this is the poor cousin of opportunity that we have to be together virtually or remotely. It's not a great start. So I suggest that we stop apologising and we make the most of, we talk about the connection, the ability to have so many of us here together live online today, sharing and interacting as natural as we can. That's how to frame something and to make people feel truly included. So the inclusivity lever is the largest and most powerful of all of these three levers in the live online environments. And there are a number of teeth to this one too. So let's have a look at those teeth. Setting the table, which I'll explain in a moment, growing the connective tissue amongst the participants, whether that only be in one live online encounter or whether you have a series of sessions running, you continue to grow the connective tissue between the people coming together live online. Um, Employing a little bit of virtual etiquette or playful rules. So we can change the rules in this environment. It doesn't all have to flow the same way as we do it every time. And that can be really engaging, inspiring, and perhaps even transformational for your groups. Now I've created three new words which are very similar to words you might be familiar with: introverts, extroverts, and ambiverts. And so I've deliberately used the IRTS to indicate that these are conceptions of how we behave in the virtual environment. So identifying your introverts, perhaps the people who are not as expressive in a virtual environment, your extroverts, the ones who hog the airwaves, the camera, and enjoy speaking, and then your ambiverts, who you may employ a range of different ways to have them interact either in the whole group, in breakout rooms, and finding their space and place. So it's interesting to think about the different styles people bring to the virtual environment. And then the final one there, generative conversations, thinking about how we generate productive conversations, things that move things, ways that we get things done rather than just having a talk fest in the session. There's a whole lot more I could unpack with each of those teeth on the inclusivity lever. But the first one that I just want to briefly look at is setting the table. Let's dive in there. So, Marilyn Voss Savant said, you should be able to set a table so that you feel like you're dining, not just sitting and eating. And I particularly like this metaphor if we relate it to our live online environment settings. So, in preparing for our live online events, we should focus on setting the table for inclusion and interaction. Setting the table means preparing to host and feed the minds and hearts of the humans who will be sitting down and logging on together. Think for a moment about how fine dining restaurants prepare the atmosphere for hosting their diners. Everything from what's on the table, so the tablecloth, the flatware, the glassware, the cutlery, to the lighting, the decorations, the wallpaper, the floor coverings, all of those things that create the ambiance. They deliberately create a setting where you feel like you're not just sitting and eating. There are practical elements that they create. So, if we relate that to the virtual table, or should I say the live online connected table, then there's some considerations here for how you want your participants to feel, some of which I've outlined a few moments ago. I'd like to encourage you to think about setting the table for your live online events so that your participants feel fully immersed and engaged from the outset, not just watching, listening, or at worst multitasking while they're online. So, the dynamics and participant experience of the live online event will depend on the choices you make on some of the key dimensions. The key dimensions being who's invited, how many are invited, what tools or software are we using, what's the agenda, who's presenting, how do we make this flow, and back to that feel, think, and do rhythm. So, just for example, don't invite 100 people to your webinar and call it a webinar, by the way. Think about calling it a muster, a salon, some of those other words. But if you invite 100 people to your webinar and then expect that they will have an ultimately immersive experience, you might be setting a bigger challenge than you've got. So, even if you use some snazzy, engaging digital tools, it really is hard to be intimate and engaging with 100 people online, particularly where there might be a whole lot of webcams off in that sense. Conversely, however, make sure you've got the right people at the virtual table. So make sure you have included enough diversity to manage and host dynamic conversations and to achieve transformational outcomes. Generally, the larger the group, the less individual engagement is possible, but the bigger diversity. So, as with face to face events, the success of your live online event depends on having a clear purpose, having the right people in the room, having the right conversations, and having skilled facilitation of a well planned agenda. All right, there's some good things to think about in setting the table. So, I love this quote from Victor Hugo. There's one thing stronger than all the armies in the world, and that is an idea whose time has come. The number one question at any point in time and in facing any challenge is, so what will you do? You may feel called to respond to the changes in the way we are communicating and collaborating in this new post pandemic environment. Or you may still be struggling with how to get back that team spirit, the culture, and the ways of working that you have lost. Either way, you have the choice how to respond. You have the choice to transform, to step up, to be a leader, lean in, and show the way for others who might be struggling just like you. It's my hope that we all continue to co create the connections and interactions that we want to have in the live online environment, not focusing on those technology glitches, not focusing on what tools we have or don't have, and certainly not propelling those negative mindsets around remote and virtual. Don't apologize. However, we define the emerging hybrid working and learning environments, it will include a lot more live online interactions. Whether we like it or not, we're all here to make friends with the trends. If you'd like to explore more about the three levers for creating transformational live online experiences and events, my book titled Leverage Live Online has just been released. I want to thank you for your time in this session. I welcome your questions and your contributions to our discussion, and I look forward to chatting with you very soon. Thank you.